hope you guys are having a lovely day. Today we're watching History and Lore Season 2, and I'm so excited, y'all. The last one was so good, and I'm so eager to get into this one, learn some more tea, hopefully. Side note, thank you so much for the new gift. The kitties love it. They'll fight over it during the whole video. They're crazy. I also got a cool little Game of Thrones sweatshirt. Guys, you know I can't pick a house. Like, I literally like all of them. They all have their good and their bad. And so this has like, I think these are the Baratheons, Targaryens, Stark, and Lannister. We got the main four. It's so sick, but I have to be so careful not to get it dirty. So I love it though. So fun. But yeah, today we're gonna get into History and Lore Season 2. Super excited. I think the first one, based off of what I just saw, is about Theon and his family, so I'm really excited to get into that. But it's gonna be the same as last time, so let's get into it. No need for a long intro on this one, but I'm so excited, y'all.
When Aegon and his dragons burned Harren the Black and all his sons at Harrenhal, the days when men feared the sight of our longships were over. Aegon would not permit marauders and raiders in his 7 kingdoms. With Harren died our empire and the old way that forged it. But what is dead may never die. 6 years after Robert Baratheon won his crown, my father, Balon Greyjoy, sought to restore our ancient rights. He declared the Iron Islands independent and himself its king, and sent the Iron Fleet in a daring raid on Lannisport, where they burned the Lannister ships at anchor, making us unchallenged in the Sunset Sea. This was the seed of our undoing. My eldest brother Roderick led a frontal assault on Seaguard, a town built to protect the mainland from us. After ferocious fighting beneath the city walls, he was slain by Lord Jason Mallister and his men defeated. By this time, Stannis Baratheon had brought Robert's fleet around Westeros, and somehow managed to trap the Iron Fleet at Fair Isle, smashing it. Robert's victory was now all but assured, yet we made him bleed for each island. Stannis Baratheon captured Great Wick, the largest of the Iron Islands, and Ser Barristan Selmy himself subdued Old Wick. Robert and Lord Eddard Stark led the main assault against the island of Pike. They razed the town of Lordsport to the ground before Robert turned his full fury on our family's stronghold. When they breached the walls, the first through was Thoros of Myr with his ridiculous flaming sword, followed by every minor lord of Westeros hungry for glory. My other brother Maron was killed when the siege engines brought down a tower on his head. I was now my father's only living son, and heir to the Iron Islands. When my father saw his cause was lost, he wisely conceded defeat to Robert, who otherwise would have pulled down our castle stone by stone with us in it. As my father said to me then, no man has ever died from bending his knee. He who kneels may rise again, blade in hand. He who will not kneel stays dead, stiff legs and all. As it stands, Robert allowed my father to keep his lands and title as Lord of the Iron Islands, King of Salt and Rock, Son of the Sea Wind, Lord Reaper of Pike, for a price. His last son and heir shipped off to Winterfell as an honoured guest. I would eat at the Stark's table and play with the Stark children. And if my father rebelled again, Lord Eddard Stark would take his sword and cut off my head. It would be his duty.
Yikes. So we knew a little bit about Theon's rebellion. Oh my gosh, Cat is talking to me. We knew a little bit about Theon's family rebellion, but we didn't know like the whole story. So basically Theon's dad was like, oh, we want to be independent, king of the north, whatever. Not king of the north, but you know what I mean. And they attacked Lannisport. I think I read that right. So that's the Lannister home. So the Lannisters obviously were part of that. And then pretty much everybody joined the war. We had Stannis, we had Robert, we had Ned, we had Thoros of Myr, who was mentioned in season 1 between Jaime and Yoren? No, not Yoren. Jory. So I want to know more on Thoros of Myr because he's mentioned like a lot as like a side character, and he has like a flaming sword, and that sounds cool. But basically the whole gang, all of the big houses were like, and they sat Theon's family down. But you know what's crazy to me is like I never really realized that. I knew Theon was like a captive, but I never really realized that if his father rebelled, Theon was losing his head because of that. And that's even scarier because we've met Theon's dad at this point, and I fully see him doing something like that, where he's like, F Theon, I have Yara. You know, like that's crazy. And it just makes me feel even more bad for Theon because like yes, the Starks treat him very well, but like literally at any moment he could have lost his head, and it wouldn't have been his fault. It was his father's fault, you know? So that's really scary, and I'm sure Theon his whole life is just like looking over his shoulder, just waiting for the moment, you know? It's just like you can't really be comfortable in a place like that. You can't really let your guard down in a place like that because they may be great people, but at the end of the day, Ned Stark's gonna do his duty like he has to. So that's really crazy to me. We had Stannis and Ser Barristan mentioned together. Were they like fighters together, or what's up with that? Maybe, I don't know. That was really interesting to me. But we know Ser Barristan is a very good fighter. I'm wondering where he went. We haven't seen him, and he's a very good fighter. And I don't think he died. So I'm hoping he comes back at some point in the show. And then we also had Robert and Ned. We knew that Theon's two brothers had died in the rebellion. So yeah. You know what really stood out to me though is his dad saying no man has ever died from bending his knee. And then now he's all talking about rebelling again. Get out of here, bro. I do not like Theon's dad, y'all. I do not like him. Anyways, on to the next.
Faces rises a monument to arrogance and cruelty.
Let me rewind a couple
Harrenhal.
Ooh, I'm excited to learn about Harrenhal.
On the shores of the God's Eye, due north of the Isle of Faces, rises a monument to arrogance and cruelty. Harrenhal. For a people who prided themselves on their ships, the Iron Men of old seized any chance to leave them, and carved out a vast...
I'm sorry. I can't turn captions on?
...kingdom from the peaceful river lords. The empire reached its zenith under King Harren Hora, called the Black by those he terrorized, and by his own men, though they meant it proudly. King Harren enslaved the Riverlands to raise the mightiest fortress Westeros had ever seen. A castle that could garrison 1 million men, with walls so vast that winters would come and go, and besieging armies grow old and grey before the castle fell. 5 towers he ordered, reaching into the heavens like grasping fingers. A monstrosity which he forced our people to build for their own subjugation. But the very day the slaves laid the last stone, Aegon Targaryen and his sisters arrived in the south. When they arrived with their small army, Harren laughed and shut the gates. Harrenhal would have its first test, and an easy one at that. It failed. Harrenhal could have withstood an assault from all the armies in Westeros combined. But Harren learned that the tallest and thickest walls meant little to dragons, for dragons fly.
Damn.
With Harren and his sons dead, Harrenhal quickly surrendered to Aegon. House Tully then raised the River Lords in rebellion against the Iron Islands, and with Aegon we flushed the Iron Men to the sea. We should have torn down the castle stone by stone then, but Harrenhal seemed such a magnificent prize that Aegon gave it to one of his commanders, whose line then withered to extinction, as would every family to hold it thereafter.
Ooh.
When many speak of Harrenhal, their voices drop to whispers about Mad Lady Lothson, who was said to send a giant bat to collect children for her crockpots, and to bathe in blood and serve feasts of human flesh. About the ghosts of Black Heron and his sons who still walk the castle at night, all aflame. Of the servants who went to bed in full health and were found in the morning, burnt to ash. Mere stories to frighten wayward children and excite young girls, you may say. You would not be entirely wrong. Harrenhal is a prize. A nigh impregnable castle with enough land and enough income to make a man, at a stroke, one of the greatest lords in Westeros. But you would not be entirely right either. Say by a king's grace, Harrenhal became yours. Now you must garrison it. You must repair it and maintain it. Even stretched to the ends of your means, you cannot fill and manage the whole castle. So you retreat your household to 4 of the 5 towers, then 3, then 2. Then only the bottom thirds of those. You close the hall of 100 hearths and take your meals in your rooms. Even then you can't shake the feeling of desolation, that Harrenhal and its vastness is devouring you. In later years, as you bury a grandson or a great-grandson, the last of your line, you will know it has.
Yikes. Oh my gosh, what's going on? Dang, y'all. Okay, I've been wanting to learn about Harrenhal, so that was actually really fun. But, so it's in the God's Eye, the Isle of Faces, which we learned about last History and Lore. The Isle of Faces is where the First Men and the Children of the Forest came to their agreement, right? And they carved like weirwood faces on the trees, and that's why it's called the Isle of Faces. And then we had King... His name is interesting. Baron Horha? Did I spell that right? Probably not. You know what I mean. So he built this giant castle. Was he an Ironman? She said an Ironman. That's Theon's family, right? Or did I pick that up wrong? And then he had all the Riverland people basically like slave over this castle and was like, build me this giant castle. And they were like, all right. And so he built this giant castle that could withstand all the armies in basically all of Westeros, which is insane. And then Aegon came in and was like, I have dragons, and cooked it. So now it's said to be cursed because every family who has held the castle has gone extinct. Interesting. And then we also have a mad lady and the ghosts of Black Heron and his family. So that's crazy. So I wonder if there's like truth to that. Like we know Tywin was at Harrenhal, but we didn't really see any ghosts, did we? Unless like Jaqen is a ghost or something. That would have been crazy. What else? Also, Littlefinger. Hopefully you go extinct, buddy. Because he just got Harrenhal, so that would be really fun. But that's really interesting because Kat's basically saying like the castle is so big that it's kind of not even worth it, because then you're just gonna have to be like repairing it and keeping up on it, and your whole family can't fit in it, so then you're just gonna feel really lonely and isolated. So it's mostly just like people want it because it's such a big castle and you'd be like such a wealthy lord, but at the end of the day, if you really think about it, it's not worth it. So that's really interesting. And then she said you need to garrison it. So is garrison like man it, like get people to like work in the kitchens and stuff like that? Is that garrison, or is it just like fixing it? I don't know what garrison means, but that's what I'm assuming. But that's really fun because we just stayed at Harrenhal and I wanted to learn more about that. So Littlefinger, you can have it. Hopefully you go extinct, buddy. Bye. House Greyjoy.
Where the north has its honor and the south its chivalry, the Iron Islands has its strength.
We call ourselves the Ironborn, and we are warriors feared throughout the Seven Kingdoms.
Or so we used to be. Unlike their mainland cousins, the first men of the Iron Islands never bowed to the old gods.
Theirs was the drowned god, who made the Ironborn to reave and sack and write their names in salt, steel, and song, that his enemy, the Storm God, could not wash away. We raised our kings from our own ranks, and used beaten foes as thralls to work our mines and farm our land.
Or as salt wives, if a woman was pretty enough. Such was the old way, and while we followed it, we held sway wherever the waves were heard. When Aegon came demanding fealty, King Harren the Black ruled as far east as the Trident.
Other kings like the Starks could kneel, but Harren was Ironborn, and the Ironborn must be beaten.
Okay, so I was right about that.
In Harrenhal, he had the mightiest castle in Westeros, and the army to defend it.
But Aegon did not intend a siege. He mounted his dragon and roasted Harren and all his sons in their tower, and the Old Way with them. Because of Harren's defiance, Aegon pushed the Ironborn back to our islands and gave the Riverlands to the Tullys. But he did allow the Ironborn to choose who would lead them.
House Greyjoy had always been one of the greatest houses of the Iron Islands. We trace our descent from the Age of Heroes and the legendary Grey King, who took a mermaid to wife and made war upon the Storm God for 1,000 years.
Blessed by the Drowned God, the Grey King fought and slew Naga, the great sea dragon, and took her fire for his own.
This history made our ancestor Vicon Greyjoy the natural choice to lead the Ironborn after Aegon's conquest. For 300 years, House Greyjoy ruled the Ironborn. We styled ourselves Lord of the Iron Islands, King of Sultan Rock, Son of the Sea Wind, Lord Reaper of Pike.
In truth, we were thralls. Our people still chanted, "What is dead may never die." But the Old Way had died.
Until the Targaryens followed their dragons into the grave, and our Lord Father, Balon Greyjoy, rose against the new king, Robert Baratheon. He seized our ancient crown and sent our Iron Fleet against the Lannisters at Lannisport, burning all their ships before any could weigh anchor.
Though Robert and Eddard Stark would later defeat him, they understood us no better than Aegon. The Greyjoy sigil is the Kraken. What it grasped once, it will never surrender.
What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger.
Yikes. So, wow, we learned a lot on the Greyjoys, which I'm so happy about because I feel like I know nothing about them. So the Iron Islands, he said that the North is known for, is it their honor? Whatever. They're known for like their certain things, and then the Iron Islands is known for its strength. So it sounds like the Iron Islands was actually like a really cool place. They had a lot of aura. They were like feared warriors, and now they're just Iron Islands. So that's interesting. They never bowed to the old gods. They worship the drowned god. So they have a different god than basically everybody in Westeros, which is interesting. But he also said that their house goes back to the Age of Heroes, which Bran had talked about in the last History and Lore. So they're basically on the same level as the First Men? Or is that before the First Men? Because I think that's before the First Men, because Bran was telling the story of the Little Mermaid Corps, Storm's End story. And that was before, or maybe the same time as the First Men. I'm interested in the timeline with that. We also had the dude who was in Harrenhal. He was an iron dude. Guys, it's so hard to organize my thoughts on this. He was an iron dude, and then he basically got his castle torched, and Aegon gave the Riverlands to the Tullys. So that's how Cat's family got the Riverlands. So that's interesting. And then the Greyjoys were picked to be like the lords because they had defeated the Great Sea Dragon, or one of their ancestors did, which we also learned about in the Age of Heroes story that Bran had talked about last time. I'm making connections. They call themselves King of Salt and Rock, which is actually like super cool. I really like that. The Old Way had died, and then they kind of like basically were holding their tongue, you know, minding their business, while Aegon and the Targaryens and everybody had dragons. They kind of just were like, all right, let me chill. And then the minute the Targaryens were off the throne, they rebelled and tried to like become hot shit again, basically. And that's why they rebelled against the Lannisters. They were like, oh, no more dragons, time for me to cause problems. And then they lost. But then their sigil is the Kraken, so that's really interesting. So what did Theon say? He said, once we get a hold of you, we never let go, or something like that. So it sounds like they keep their, oh my gosh, what's a word for it? They hold grudges in a way. Is that the right word for it? They hold their grudges. So that's really interesting. I don't know. I think the Greyjoy house is like not as cool as it used to be. Like from what I've seen off of it, it's kind of just like, you guys think you're hot shit, but you're not. So that's really interesting. Anyways.
Though Robert had risked all our lives to win it, the Iron Throne bored him. He cared little for justice, and less for rule. If it weren't women or wineskin, he had no use for it. Without the stalwart Jon Arryn as Hand of the King, the challenge to Robert's crown would have come much earlier than it did. The Iron Islands have never lacked for treachery. They respect only strength, and honor is as foreign to them as the Seven. After 6 years, their ruler, Lord Balon Greyjoy, wagered that King Robert had not won the support of the great houses of Westeros, many of whom still named him usurper. Lord Balon declared the Iron Islands independent, and sent his Iron Fleet to Lannisport. Lord Tywin Lannister was careless, and the Ironborn caught and burnt his ships at anchor. Lord Balon and his reavers controlled the Sunset Sea. Robert then ordered me to succeed where his father-in-law, Lord Tywin, had failed. Beneath Robert's fury, I sensed relief. War he could understand. He would smash Lord Balon as he had Rhaegar. I raised Robert's fleet and sailed around Westeros to the Iron Islands. I set a trap for the Iron Fleet off Fair Isle. As sailors and warriors, the Ironborn are unparalleled. But they're not soldiers. They have no discipline, no strategy, no unity. In a battle, each man fights only for his own glory, and their longships are built for lightning strikes and shore raids. When the captains rushed in, I smashed their longships with our larger war galleys. The strength of the Ironborn is in their ships. With the Iron Fleet broken, I had assured Robert's victory. He could now transport troops and siege weapons to invade the Iron Islands. And contrary to Balon's hopes, Robert had plenty of both. I've never seen such allegiance as Robert could inspire in war. Enemies who tried to kill him one day would be drinking with him the next under their own fallen banners. In rebelling against the Iron Throne, Lord Balon did more than Robert ever could to cement his rule. When Robert came to the Iron Islands, he brought with him the full power of Westeros. Sir Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard led the assault on Old Wick, while I subdued Great Wick, the largest of the Iron Islands. But Robert saved the seat of House Greyjoy, Pike, for himself and Lord Eddard. Robert would later boast of the battle's bloodiness and how he could have torn down the island into the waves if Lord Balon hadn't bent the knee. But if I'd have led the assault, Balon's neck would have bent, under his sword. Because I do not forget, I do not pardon. His time will come. All their times will come.
Interesting. It's fun hearing things from Stannis's perspective. He's so different. But you can in season 2 when he was like, oh, I don't have any love for my brother. He still at the end of the day was a good brother, it sounded like. Because he had said the Iron Throne bored Robert and, he didn't like it and he likes his wars. And then the Theon's family rebelled and Stannis said, this might be good for Robert because he can understand war and that's good for him and make him happy type of thing. And that's actually kind of cute. That's a good brother. But anyways, we had Jon Arryn basically help with the throne. Stannis had made a little side comment about that of I think other people would have tested Robert on the throne if it weren't for Jon Arryn. So that's really interesting. And then he also said that Iron Islanders respect only strength, so they don't have like, you know, boundaries or morals type of thing. It's just strength. So that's really interesting. And then Theon's dad had basically wagered that Robert wasn't loved by the other houses. They still saw him as a usurper, so he was like, oh, it's a perfect time, you know, he has his own issues, I'll be fine. And he was wrong. So Theon's dad, maybe before you rebel, do some research next time. Tywin was careless and got his ships burned. That was interesting to me. I need more on that because I've never heard the sentence Tywin and careless or the words Tywin and careless next to each other. So that's really interesting to me. I'm wondering like what the full story with that is. Like, did Tywin just like parked his ships in the ocean and then he came and burned them? You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean Tywin was careless? When is Tywin ever careless? Or is that Stannis' bias in a way, maybe? Like, Stannis doesn't rock with Tywin, so he was just like, oh, he was careless. When in reality, like, Tywin would have never known that Theon's family was on the way to burn his ships. So it's interesting. And then Stannis had also said that they're unparalleled sailors, the Iron Islanders. But when it comes to like real war and like on ground war and stuff, because they're each fighting for themselves. And we kind of saw that with Theon when he went to Winterfell. He was like, okay, like this is what we're going to do, you know, his whole speech. And then they just like knocked him out and then took him home. So it's kind of just for personal glory. It's not for like a whole army, for the whole land. Like you see Robb and his camp, and they are doing it for the North, and they're doing it for Robb, and they're doing it for Ned. Like they all fight together with one purpose, and then we have Theon's men who each one has their own individual drive. So that's really interesting. He also said the strength was in their ships, so once he crushed their ships, it was over for them. So if we ever have problems with the Greyjoys, all we need to do is set their ships on fire. Light work. But that's very interesting. Also makes me think like there's definitely some tension between Tywin, Stannis, and is it Balon Greyjoy? Is that how you say Theon's dad's name? So they all seem to not like each other. And I feel like Stannis and Tywin are like two big figures in the story right now. So that's really interesting. But Stannis is definitely still holding a grudge on Balon because of the whole rebellion, and he said he wouldn't have let him live. So that's crazy to me because you can tell Stannis still has a little bit of a vendetta against him. So I'm wondering if that goes anywhere, if there's like a storyline between Stannis and Balon or something. That would be interesting.
The Seven are gods of weakness and defeat, pretty chains that the first men kindly put on after the Andals crushed them, except in the Iron Islands. Since the Dawn Age, the Ironborn have followed the drowned god, who plucked fire from the sea and made us to reave and sack and carve our names in blood and song. When the Andals landed on the Iron Islands, they found a god who was father, warrior, and stranger, who took mother, maiden, and crone when he would, and held the smith in thrall. His priests are the drowned men, who are clothed and armed by the sea itself. They consecrate us to the drowned god through our most sacred rite, the drowning, and ask the god to raise us from the sea as he was, harder and stronger. The Ironborn do not fear the bloodiest battles or the roughest waves, for the drowned god taught us long ago that what is dead may never die. When an Ironborn falls, we say the drowned god needed a strong oarsman and took him below to feast in the god's watery halls, attended by mermaids. But even in death, an Ironborn is a warrior. We fight against the Storm God, who holds a castle in the clouds, and sends the winds to lure the Ironborn off course or wreck our ships. It's said my legendary ancestor, the Grey King, waged war upon the Storm God for 1,000 years. With the Drowned God's help, he slew the great sea dragon Naga and used her bones for his hall. After his death, the Storm God tried to wash away any memory of this terrible foe, but his songs fill our halls to this day. It was the Storm God who first blew the Andals to the Iron Islands, to subdue us and turn us from our faith. True, they conquered and killed our king, but in time they forsook their septs for the shore, and their fat septons for the drowned men. The Andals came to us as conquerors. In the end, they drowned. The Ironborn are of the sea, as our god made us, and given to it as our god taught us. We do not fear the storm god's winds or his waves, but you should, for they bring us to you.
That's fun. I like hearing things from Yara's perspective. It's super fun. You can tell she's very proud of her house. So we have she's started that with the 7 gods are gods of weakness, which is crazy because we know the 7 are gods of weakness, which is crazy because we know like the 7 is such a big, spiritual religious figure. Celeste is going crazy, y'all. So that was really fun to see, but their god plucked fire from the sea and then like gave them the motivation to like reave and sack and like take whatever is theirs. So they're very, very big on the ocean, the drowned god, the drowned men. The priests are the drowned men, ? So that's like their maesters in a way, or maybe like their red woman, like kind of like their like spiritual figure. They're the drowned men. And then the drowning raises you from the sea and makes you harder and stronger. So that's when Theon was getting like baptized. That was kind of like the ritual thing. What is dead may never die is said a lot. That's definitely their saying. When an Ironborn falls, the sea god kind of like takes him to their little like sea heaven in a way where they're surrounded by mermaids. That's fun. And then they are basically like fighting the storm god, so like the wind. Theon's family is literally fighting the wind. I can't. But anyways, the storm god is like their bad guy, their enemy in a way. And so they see the Andals as somebody who was like pushed onto them from the storm god. Like the sea and the wind took the Andals to Westeros, basically. So it sounds like the Andals tried to also take over the Iron Islands when they came over originally, and they lost. So they got all the other parts of Westeros, like especially like the south part of Westeros, but when it came to the Iron Islands, they were defeated. So that's really interesting because I didn't know that. So it is the same as like the Iron Men were kind of around at the same time as the First Men. So their family is very old. We also had the Grey King who waged war upon the Storm God and slayed the sea dragon Naga, which we've learned about a lot. And that was a Greyjoy ancestor, right? And then I think that's it. Lots on the Greyjoy family today, y'all. I'm loving it, though. I've been wanting to learn about them. This is fun.
Dark wings, dark words. I was only a boy when the Raven came to call my father, Lord Eddard Stark, to another war. Balon Greyjoy had raised the Iron Islands in revolt and burned the Lannister fleet at anchor. King Robert Baratheon again needed his old friend. My mother Catelyn was not happy to lose her lord husband to Robert again. 6 years before, he had left her to avenge his father and brother against the Mad King. But now he had sons and daughters of his own, and, unspoken, another son who wasn't hers from the last time he went to war.
Hey, Jon.
My brother, Jon Snow. But she knew that in marrying my father, she had married the North. We hold our honor and duty as dear as our old gods. When the time came, my father marched south to restore peace and order to the realm. My father always told me the Iron Islands were a strange and dangerous place. Its people, the Ironborn, keep neither the old gods nor the Seven, and despise all honest toil. Their ancestors ravaged the western shores, raping and slaving and putting it to the torch, and their songs still ring through the halls of the Ironborn, while everywhere else, they're whispered to wayward children at bedtime. Perhaps Lord Balon thought Westeros had not healed from the war against the Mad King,
and was as fragmented and suspicious as the ancient kingdoms his forebears had terrorized. Robert's navy corrected him at Fair Isle when they smashed the Proud Iron Fleet. Robert and my father corrected him at Pike, his own castle, when they pulled down his towers and breached his walls. My father never liked to speak of his battles, but from other men I learned what transpired. Thoros of Myr was first through the breach with his flaming sword. Not far behind him was Jorah Mormont of Bear Island, my father's bannerman who earned the knighthood he would later shame, and lords from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. All day, through every passage in the castle, they fought side by side. My father with our ancestral sword Ice, and King Robert with his warhammer against a horde of axe-wielding Ironborn. In the end, Lord Balon bent the knee. King Robert generously allowed Lord Balon to retain his title and castle. The price of peace was custom. The only son of Balon's to survive his foolish rebellion would be taken as a hostage against future treasons. My father even volunteered to foster the boy himself, I suspect, to make Theon Greyjoy a different man than his father,
Look at little
who would bring honor
Theon.
and duty to the Iron Islands when he returned as heir. So my mother's silent fear came true, and my father returned with another child.
Damn.
Theon ate with us, played with us, and fought with us. Once the great bond between my father and Robert Baratheon united the realm against the Mad King and brought him to justice for his crimes. Now, another monster sits on the Iron Throne, and another debt of blood is owed my family. Theon is my murdered father's ward. I am my murdered father's son. Like my father and Robert, bound in blood, if not by blood, we are brothers.
Damn. Ooh, we get to learn about Karth? Heck yeah. Yo, that was a good one. Wow, that was really good. Dark wings and dark words to call Ned to Robert was crazy. So it was 6 years after they rebelled against the Mad King, so it really hadn't been that long. And then Ned had his whole family, and Jon Snow was there now. Yikes. You know what's interesting to me? It's crazy to be like, this was like back-to-back sentences of, oh yeah, you know, my dad had just come home with a bastard child, or an illegitimate child, sorry. Illegitimate child, and honor and duty is the key to our house. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy to put those two together. Ned had also said Iron Island is a strange and a dangerous place. So definitely they have like roots, you know, they have like such long history that they're just so different from everybody else. And that's why I'm so fascinated by them. Like, they're so different from everybody. And then the like Iron Men stories are kind of like whispered to children at bedtime. So like the Iron Islanders, especially like back in their prime, they were definitely like scary, you know, you feared them. Now they're just like, It's interesting that I think I picked this up right. Ned was assuming that maybe Balon hadn't healed from the Mad King. Did I pick that up right? Or from one of the Targaryens? I think it was the Mad King. And so they went to go correct him, which is crazy because that, compared to Stannis' perspective, is like Stannis is like, oh, he knew what he was doing and he wouldn't have kept his head. And then we have Ned, who's much more like gracious and, you know, patient, and is like, you know, maybe he has trauma. So that's really interesting. And so they went to go correct him, which is crazy. I also thought it was really interesting that Ned never spoke about his battles to his children, which is like such a good dad move. We miss you, Ned. That's crazy. But we had Thoros of Myr and Jorah Mormont, who I'm assuming it's not Jorah Mormont, Daenerys Jorah Mormont, but his dad, because I think they have the same name. So I think it's the older Jorah Mormont that was fighting with Thoros of Myr, which is very interesting because around what time did he join the wall? Was it when younger Jorah, sold slaves? because it seems like the Mormont family was very close with the Starks, possibly. And Thoros of Myr, was he a northerner? I want to know about Thoros of Myr. I want to know what's going on with that dude. He's mentioned a lot, and we know like nothing on him. Sounds like he was a really good fighter. He had a flaming sword, so that's really interesting. King Robert surprises me. I feel like every time I hear stories about him, like he's extremely good in battle, and then he's a very like forgiving, gracious guy. You know, he's like, you're fine. You can keep your home. You're fine. It's just crazy to me. Like, you would expect somebody who's very driven in battle and a very good fighter. Like, typically, I feel like men like that are very big, like, hotheads. And they just, like, see red and they kill everybody and everything. And, like, if you betray them, you're dying. And so it's really surprising to me that Robert isn't like that. Like, he's very much like, oh, you're fine. Don't do it again. We're going to take Theon. So that's really interesting. And then we also had... Dude, the line about how Ned was taking home another child is insane. I never saw it that way. And I think in the beginning of season 2, I had said, does Kat have any animosity towards Theon like she does Jon Snow? And I'm still wondering about that. We haven't really seen that. I think she seemed a little more cordial towards Theon, but that's a crazy connection that I didn't put together. But at the end of the day, Theon isn't Ned's illegitimate child, so I think it would be a little easier for her to be nicer to him. But the fact that Ned took him in hopes to maybe make him a different man breaks my effing heart, because he did, in a way. It just didn't stick. And at the end of the day, like, Theon's gonna do what he can to please his father, which just sucks so much, because it's like, in Ned's life, he tried to make a change in Theon's life, and he did. It just didn't stick. And then it's like, now Ned is in the grave. It's so sad. It's so sad. But that was really good. On to the next.
Karth has always and only belonged to the Kartheen. We were never part of Valeria's empire, nor have we ever fallen to a Dothraki horde. Our walls and the red waste outside them guard us from such annoyance. Many call the approach to our city the Garden of Bones. It needs little tending to grow. Our city, however, would be quite a prize for any empire. Karth straddles two worlds, a greedy and curious west, and a rich and mysterious east. The marvels of Yiti and Ashai pass through our markets, and share berths with the riches of the free cities and Westeros. Our ports have fulfilled many a trader's dreams, almost as many as they have broken. We call Karth the greatest city that ever was or will be. An easy claim to make if one knows only the docks and customs houses of other cities. An easy lie to swallow if a people see only the gold and jewels of their rulers, which we, the 13 who govern the city, are careful to ensure. The proud Kartheen shook off the yoke of unjust kings long ago, so they are told at festivals by the pureborn, the king's direct descendants who have controlled the 13 ever since. Only now, instead of scepters, they use ships. A merchant only remains on the 13 until the others are no longer afraid to deny him, or too afraid to deny his replacement. Except for the warlocks. They alone hold a hereditary seat, a relic from when they had powers, or at least from when the world was younger and more easily duped. Over the years, we have developed an understanding with them. They shall always be welcome on our councils and at affairs of state, provided they never come. Rare is the civic problem that can be solved by cryptic nonsense and shade of the evening. Thankfully, they need little encouragement to confine themselves to their House of the Undying. Yet perhaps we Kartheen are too confined ourselves. We feel safe behind our walls and our laws, which no visitor can hope to follow, and by which any citizen who vouches for a guest always pays with his life. But like a ship in the summer seas, a city grows becalmed without fresh wind. The greatest city that ever was or will be? An epitaph. I would prefer the greatest city that is.
Is that the end of that? Okay. Guys, I love Takis, so Takis that is hilarious. Interesting. You know what's even more interesting is Zaro Zondoxos or whatever his name is. He's speaking in riddles over here. Like, buddy, can you just give it to me straight, please? So Cartho had never been a part of Valyria, which I didn't realize, y'all. I'm slacking. I'm getting a map today. I didn't realize it was so close to Valyria or like associated with Valyria. Also, I'm sorry about the light. The kitties are in the blinds. And they had never fallen to the Dothraki because they have their big walls. So that's really interesting. And then we learned about the Garden of Bones through Jorah. So we knew that. But the city would be quite a prize if somebody had taken it. But the West is known for their greed because of their trade ports, potentially. And then the East is mysterious. So what's in the East? What do you got in the East, y'all? Ashai and the Free Cities are mentioned a bunch by Jorah. And they trade with Qarth, it sounds like. So I would love to learn more on Ashai and the Free Cities, because I think Jorah has said the name Ashai like 1,000,000 times at this point. Zaro had said that the best city that ever was or will be or whatever is a lie. Like, basically, you know, just what they tell people. In reality, it's just kind of really schemy, it sounds like. Also, something really interesting that we didn't know, or I didn't know, is the king's direct descendants control the 13. So what does that mean? So is there... Because they had said there was no king of Qarth. So I'm assuming they had a king in the past, potentially killed that king, rebelled against that king, or the king died out or something, and anybody with that bloodline has main control over the 13. So maybe the like main guy, the bald dude, I think, the one that Daenerys had tried to get ships from, maybe he's part of the king's bloodline, because he seemed to have a little more power than the others. And then we also found out that the warlocks hold a hereditary seat, which is really interesting. So the warlocks basically have power no matter what. And they're welcome on the council, provided they never come, which is so interesting because the warlock we saw during Dany's time was on the council. And it sounds like Zaro made the right choice to pair up with the warlocks because they have the most power, they have the most influence, and they're able to get stuff done. And then Qarth is potentially too confined, which is what I was thinking. I was like, you guys are in the middle of the desert, nobody around you. You're just in your little city. So that's very interesting. Qarth is a puzzle to me. I'm still like, why? Ooh, who are you? What are you guys doing? So it's very interesting, but definitely like they've kind of pushed out into the world that they're a very wealthy like trade city, but it seems like there's a lot more to it than that, which there typically is, but juicy. The warlocks. Let's learn about them.
The East is plagued with mystics who claim many dread powers but prove only one, separating the foolish from their purses. Not so with the renowned warlocks of Qarth. They demand a much dearer coin in return for their parlor tricks. Respect. Once, the warlocks truly were mighty, or so they would have us believe. I do not doubt they have many secrets. They are an old order, and one does not obtain a seat on the 13, the governing council of Qarth, without making 12 of our most powerful citizens afraid to forbid it. Thankfully for Qarth, the warlocks exert little influence in our politics. They rarely leave the confines of the House of the Undying, a pompous name, but, I admit, a strange and dark tower. It is said that none who enter ever leave. Of course, since there are no visible doors, I have to believe none ever enter either. We can only imagine what the warlocks do inside. I wager we do not have to imagine much. They read dusty scrolls detailing their lost glory. They sip shade of the evening, a foul concoction brewed from the nearby trees, until their lips turn blue, the better to frighten children and the ignorant. Stewing in their fantasies like an old soldier who drinks alone so no one may challenge their prowess. Whatever the warlocks may wish, their magic, like all magic, is dead in the world, if it ever existed. Though, one does hear strange whispers of late. Glass candles that have been cold for 100 years, now burning. Ghost grass, found far from the lands of the shadow. A Kalasar led by a woman with 3 heads. Traders' nonsense, most likely. But should the Warlock's vaunted magic ever return, that would be a dangerous day for Karth. I shall need to keep my eyes on them. Indeed.
Interesting. Let me finish my note. Okay, so Zaro and it seems like everybody else in Karth kind of sees the Warlocks as like, sure, buddy. Sure, you got magic. Sure. Which just seems to be a very common trait in this land. Like, people just don't believe the White Walkers. They don't believe magic anymore. They don't believe that the Warlocks had magic to begin with, or maybe they did, but now they don't. So they see it as like parlor tricks, which is just such a very common theme. And then it ties in perfectly with the Warlocks saying, you know, our magic is strongest in your presence and the dragon's presence. So my theory that the dragons and the White Walkers is making magic come back. It's gotta be right. So Warlocks, they still hold a lot of respect, even though most people like Zaro and stuff, it seems like, see them as parlor tricks, but they still hold a lot of respect, like just in case. They were mighty, and they are like an older generation type of thing. So they've been around for a long time. They used to be extremely powerful, I'm assuming, when there was dragons with the Targaryens and stuff. But now that there's no more dragons, they're not as powerful. They have little influence over politics because they never leave the House of the Undying. Sounds accurate. I wonder what they do in the House of the Undying. And Zaro was trying to guess, and now I'm trying to guess because I have no idea. And Zaro thinks they just read Dusty Scrolls and get high, so I could see it. Also very interesting that Warlock's magic potentially returning, and then Zaro being like, that's a very dangerous thing. I'm gonna have to keep an eye on them. Then Dany comes in, and the Warlock's magic is obviously powerful. You're seeing like multiple versions of this dude, and like it's no longer a parlor trick. Like, he's genuinely doing magic. And I think that's where Zaro decided to partner up with him. It was like, okay, I either partner up with him or I get left behind type of thing. So Zaro decided to partner up with the Warlock dude after seeing how much power he got from Dany's dragons. So that's interesting. I'm wondering if we're going to get more of Karth, like if we're going to get a Karth storyline now that we know that they have like a rebellion and Zaro's king and the Warlock is part of it too now. So that's very interesting to me. But wow, y'all are weird over there.
At its height, the Valyrian freehold ruled over half the known world. Not bad for former shepherds, but the doom fell on them and sank their capital into the sea. Now Volantis is the ember of old Valyria, ensuring its flame does not go out from this world, as any Volantine will tell you. Pentoshi say the same about Pentos, Lysenes about Lys, and so on. But after enough time in the 9 free cities, it's hard to see them as anything but ashes of glory. Volantis is the oldest, the first colony of Valyria. After the Doom, the Volantines tried to rebuild the Empire under their rule. They failed, not least because the last Valyrian with dragons, Aegon Targaryen, entered the war against them. Now they are content to dominate only their lower classes, or so they say. Braavos is the strangest, a city erected not by the freehold, but against it. A labyrinth of illusion and deceit to hide the refugees from Valyria's slave lords. After the Doom, the city emerged from the shadows to become one of the greatest banking centers in the world. A man can get anything in Braavos, for a price. Especially death. Your own if you offend one of the swaggering swordsmen that pollute the city. Or, if you're very rich, or very desperate, anyone else's. Lys is the easiest of the free cities. Full of pleasure houses catering to every taste, no matter how peculiar.
Many men lose themselves in Lyse and are never found. At least alive. When a man runs out of coin, the Lycians may grant him their other speciality on the house. Poison.
Ooh.
Pentos is the most ruthless. The Magisters make a great show of choosing the Prince of Pentos from the great families and granting him the powers of trade, justice, and war, as long as he checks with them first. On the new year, to bring good fortune to Pentos, this prince must deflower the Maid of the Field and the Maid of the Seas. I confess I don't know how each is chosen, or what becomes of them after serving their purpose. But if a crop should fail or a war be lost, the Magisters will slit the prince's throat and choose another. The other free cities are known for what they make. Mia has its lenses and finery, Norvos, its axes, Quohor, its smiths who can reforge Valyrian steel, Tyrosh, its colors. I'm sure Lorath had something to the world, but I can't think of it. Frankly, the 9 of them are more alike than they would care to admit. They hire the same soldiers to fight the same wars for the same rulers, the rich, be they called Magisters, Archons, or what have you. When a Dothraki Khalasar approaches, they gift the same tribute to avoid the same sacking. For thousands of years, the disgraced of Westeros have drained east to pool in the free cities, where a man of honor counts for less than nothing, unless it raises his price. Better men than I have learned that what a man sells for gold, he can never buy back. He must earn it, by fire and blood.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about Volantis and the Free Cities, and we're finally learning about it. So the Free Cities Volantis is a part of it. So like it sounds like Volantis is like the mainland type of thing. And I think Talissa is from Volantis, is she not? I think that's what she said. Yeah, right? Yeah, I think she said Volantis. So Volantis was Valyria? Am I picking that up right? Or no, it was the freehold of Valyria. So there's Valyria, and then they took over another area, right? They conquered it, and then they took it over, and they called it the freehold of Valyria, and then the doom happened. So it was like Rome, and it like fell in a day. I see. I remember now. So the Volantis, they tried to make like old Valyria in a way. They tried to like rebuild it, but it didn't work. And then we also learned about Braavos, which I've been wanting to learn about Braavos because we also have, what's interesting to me is there's a lot of Braavos connections and Arya connections right now. So I'm wondering what's going to happen with that. Are we going to Braavos Arya? Because she had her dancing master who was from Braavos, and then now she had her creepy hitman who was from Braavos. So something with Arya and Braavos, which is very interesting. And it seems like Braavos is kind of like, they're just interesting themselves. Like they have a lot of, they're different from everybody else, which you can kind of tell through Syrio and through Jaqen. Like they're different, and it's very interesting. They have, a banking center, so they're known for their money in a way. They hide from slavers? ? So they don't have slaves in that land or on that island or that city. They also have Syrio. Rip Syrio. And then they also have really good swordsmen. So it seems like there's just like a lot going on in Braavos. I want to learn more on Braavos. Lyse is the easiest, Jorah had said, with pleasure houses, and we knew that through Littlefinger, where he said he had bought a Lysine girly, and she was very expensive. So they're kind of like Vegas over there. They have fun over there. But if you run out of coin, they kill you. That's crazy. Pentos is ruthless. So there's the Prince of Pentos, which is crazy. That's a cool title. And he hooks up with the Maid of the Field and the Maid of the Sea. So it's kind of like a rite, like a ritual in a way. If y'all have read ACOTAR, it's like a rite. And then that's supposed to help with crops, and they're supposed to grow. I'm assuming it's like a gift to the gods type of thing. And then if they fail, like if the crops fail or if they lose a war, they kill the Prince of Pentos because it's basically like his fault. Like maybe he didn't bless the land properly or something, or he has bad juju because his blessing of the land caused this. That's crazy. The only thing I caught in those ones that he said quickly was Korhor and Steel, because he said he was going to go to Korhor when he snitched on Danny. So they make weapons in Korhor. And then the 9 are more alike than they would like to admit, but the rich rule. So it doesn't sound like they have like a monarchy in a way. It's just like a bunch of rich people, like a government kind of. So they rule. And then we also know that they have slaves because Talissa had told us that Volantis was like a slave city, and then she didn't want to live in a slave city again. So it sounds like all of them may have slaves except for Braavos. So that's very interesting. Or maybe just Volantis. Volantis is like the main city. He has a bunch of slaves and stuff too. And then he also made a lot of comments about like honor at the end, which was very interesting because that's coming from Jorah. But he said what a man earns with gold, he can never buy back. So that's really interesting. And I definitely think that's like him talking about selling slaves and kind of regretting it. So it sounds like I think they said this, but I'm not sure. When Jorah was in trouble with Ned, he fled to the Free Cities, and I think he kind of learned a lot through the Free Cities, and that's kind of what made Jorah the man he is today. So interesting. I could be picking that up wrong though, so we'll see.
My brother Robert Baratheon had raised the banners of Storm's End, our ancestral castle, against the mad King Aerys. Jon Arryn of the Vale and Eddard Stark of the North stood with him, and Hoster Tully of the Riverlands would join. But their lands were far from ours, and separated by the combined strength of the West, the Reach, and King's Landing itself. Even Robert's own lords were against him. It was the hardest choice I've ever made. My brother or my king. Blood or honor. Aerys ruled by right of all the laws in Westeros. Everyone knew the price of defiance. But there are deeper, older laws. The younger brother bows before the elder. I followed Robert. Early in the war, Mace Tyrell's indecisive victory at Ashford cut Robert off from Storm's End. Instead of pursuing Robert and risking his record, Mace Tyrell turned east and laid siege to our home. His vast army and navy encircled us and prevented any resupply by land or sea. If a wagon tried to reach us, it was burnt. If a ship tried to land, it was sunk. We were locked in Storm's End to starve, but Robert commanded me to hold the castle no matter the cost. He could ill afford to lose his ancient seat, which had never fallen. While Robert smashed Rhaegar on the Trident, my men ate the dogs, because the horses had already been devoured. While the Lannisters sacked King's Landing, we ate the rats. If the smuggler Davos had not slipped through the Tyrell blockade with his onions, we'd have eaten our own dead. But I held the castle until Lord Eddard remembered us and marched to lift the siege. The Tyrells didn't even put up a fight. And Robert threw a feast to celebrate Lord Eddard's victory. I was sent to the Royal Island stronghold of Dragonstone to deal with Viserys and Daenerys, the last surviving Targaryen children. Before I arrived, however, they escaped across the narrow sea. Robert was furious. He stripped me of Storm's End and gave it to that prancing fool Renly, my younger brother. I could keep Dragonstone. Now Robert is dead, and a bastard pretender soils my throne while the realm fills with schemers and traitors. But the rightful king is coming for them all, and I will not stop until I have scoured this land clean of abomination. The Baratheons say, ours is the fury. I will show them. Fury burns.
So I wrote down Hoster Tully's name, and I think that's Kat's dad. And I haven't written down his name, so I wrote it down just in case. We had A little comment from Stannis that Robert's own lords were against him when it came to the rebellion, which is very interesting. So it sounds like the Lords of Storm's End. This is where I need a map. Oh me. The Tyrells? No, because Tyrells are Warden. Interesting. Well, that's an interesting comment, though. And then Stannis also talked about how he had a whole debate about brother or king, which is very interesting because I never really looked at it that way. And we know Stannis is a very honorable man. Like, he does things by the rule book. So when you're in that position, which one do you pick? And he said the younger brother bows before the older, so he picked his brother. So that's crazy. Like, Stannis just makes every decision based off of rules. Like, it's no, like, duty or motivation or anything like that. Like, it's based off of how it should be. And so that's just so interesting to me. We also had Stannis, who got surrounded in Storm's End, which we learned a little bit about, but now we kind of got the full story of it. And it sounded like they were surrounded by the Tyrell family. And we knew the Tyrell family sided with the Targaryens. So the Tyrell family surrounded Storm's End, and Stannis was in a pickle. They were starving. Then Davos slipped through, smuggled in some onions so they could eat, and that's why he's called the Onion Knight now. Good job, Davos. We miss you, King. And then Ned came back and lifted the siege. She said Ned finally remembered us or something like that and came back and lifted the siege against the Tyrells. They didn't even fight. It was an easy victory. So it's very interesting to me. But then we had Stannis go to Dragonstone to get rid of Daenerys and Viserys, only to find out that they had escaped already. So that's interesting. So that's how Stannis got to Dragonstone in the first place. He went back to Robert, but then Robert was, pissed off and was like, okay, you have Dragonstone, you have Storm's End. I'm interested to, collecting my thoughts. Did Robert give Storm's End to Renly because he was mad at Stannis for not killing Daenerys and Viserys fast enough? Does that make sense? That's a lot of names. Because Stannis had to go kill Dany and Viserys, and then they weren't there. So was Robert kind of mad at Stannis for that? Like, kind of blamed Stannis for that and was like, you should have gotten there quicker. And that's why he didn't get Storm's End? Or was he just mad in general and then gave Stannis Dragonstone? Because Dragonstone, from what I've been told on the Patreon, is actually like the heir place. Like, it's like the next in line, that's their home. So I feel like I would be happy with Dragonstone over Storm's End. But I think Stannis saw that as an insult because he had held Storm's End and he wanted Storm's End. So that whole thing is a little confusing to me because I think Stannis is a little salty over it, but it sounds like Dragonstone was a good thing. Yeah, I'm trying to read that. It's confusing. Anyways.
Family, duty, honor. Every Tully child learns our words. But I was a woman before I understood them. Years before, my father had taken to foster the son of a wartime friend, a minor lord on the Fingers.
Littlefinger.
The boy had arrived at our castle as Peter Baelish. Due to his home and size, my brother soon named him Littlefinger. When I came of age, Brandon Stark of Winterfell sought and won my hand. To my father, Brandon was heir to the north and a suitable match for a daughter of House Tully. To me, Brandon was wild and terrifying, never far from laughter or trouble. I loved him with all the fire of a first passion, much I came to realize as Peter loved me. When Peter heard of my engagement, he challenged Brandon to a duel. Peter survived only because I begged Brandon not to kill him. I still thought of Peter as family. Now, I wish I had let him die.
Period.
Only days before my wedding, when I thought to be happy forever, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen abducted Brandon's sister, Lyanna. Hot-blooded as always, Brandon immediately rode for King's Landing to demand justice, which the Mad King Aerys Targaryen gave him, in his own twisted fashion.
Damn.
The day the Raven arrived with the news of my Brandon's death, I locked myself in a room and refused to eat for days. Until my father reminded me of my duty. I was to marry Eddard,
That
Brandon's
sucks.
younger brother. A man whom I had never met, though of whom none spoke ill, or spoke anything at all. Our union would cement an alliance of the North, Vale, Stormlands, and Riverlands in rebellion against the Mad King. I was a Tully. I did my duty. We were married quickly, and were spared only one night before he had to return to the field. I spent the war by the windows waiting for a raven to hear if my son would grow up fatherless or at all. We knew the price of defeat. I scoured the kitchens and washing rooms for any and all gossip. Robert had won and crushed the Mad King. Robert had lost, but Jaime Lannister was now king. Robert had almost won, but the Mad King had become a dragon and burned King's Landing to ash. At night, I told myself the war would end soon and bring peace. Either a victory or the grave. I was wrong. Robert won, and my husband avenged his brother and my love. But when he came home to me, he could not meet my eyes. I saw the reason by his side. Many men have bastards, I know. And under the strain of war, any man, no matter how honorable, may forsake his vows for a night of warmth that he may never know again. But Ned Stark was not built like other men. His northern honor would not let him sequester his shame in some distant holdfast. He brought this boy, this Jon Snow, home to raise with his true-born children. My children. Yet even these bitter memories are sweet now. They are all I have left of my Ned. Our family is broken and scattered, and our son must wage a war for the pieces. We need to go home. The Starks are of the north, and, like the snows of winter when they come south, they melt away.
Yikes. Oh man, that was good. That was good hearing like Kat's perspective and getting a little more of her story, because it's so easy to be like, Kat, why are you so horrible to Jon Snow? Blah 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 blah. But like when you look at it from her perspective, damn, that sucks. She was like actually in love with Brandon Stark, and then she was like all happy that they were engaged, you know, it was looking good. Then Peter comes in, Littlefinger comes in and is like, I like her. And then tried to duel him. Kat was like, no, keep him alive. He's like a brother to me. And then, yeah. Then Brandon got killed by the Mad King. And she was kind of forced to marry Ned. It was her duty, family duty honor. But she said that like she had heard nothing about Ned before, so Ned was like truly side character energy, which is crazy. Which we actually learned from Cersei in season 1, where she was like, she said something about, you know, your brother was made to rule and you were always made to like be your brother's warrior or something like that. Like you weren't meant to be in this position, it was supposed to be your brother type of thing. So we actually kind of learned that from Cersei in the first season, but I didn't realize it was like so bad that even Kat hadn't heard anything about him. It's crazy that they were married for one night. She got pregnant off of one night and then didn't see him for months. That's insane. And she said did her duties and spent the war by the window. Wow, like that's crazy. While pregnant with this new husband who's your lover's brother, you had one night together. That's insane. And then imagine just like the love of your life basically dying. You have to marry his brother. You get pregnant off of one night. You don't see him for months. Then he comes back after war, after months of not knowing what's going on. He comes back, another kid in his arms. I would crash out. Are you kidding me? And so it sounds like also illegitimate children actually get sent away. They don't stay at the house. Like that's not a common thing. So that's where a lot of Kat's animosity comes from. And she's like, you know, it wouldn't be a big deal if he just went off with the other illegitimate children. But no, Ned wants him to be raised in our house, which isn't common unless you're in the north, it sounds like. So that's very interesting. And then she said her family is broken and scattered, which I agree with. But the longer they're in the south, they like melt away like snow. So it sounds like the longer we're in the south, the more trouble we're going to get in. So we need to go home. Dang. That was actually really good. I really liked that segment. 10 out of 10.
In King's Landing, if you leave the Red Keep and aren't careful, you may find yourself in Flea Bottom. In such a cesspool did House Seaworth have its glorious start. I got out as soon as I could, finding work on a smuggler's ship. Soon, every port on the narrow sea had a bounty on me, which they would collect if I didn't pay a percentage to the right people or pick the right tides. You know how to tell a good smuggler? When you talk to one, there's a head that talks back. I was very good. Davos of Flea Bottom had run with orphans and beggars, but Davos the smuggler was received by merchants and lords when nobody would catch them. Oddly, the only honest work came from pirates like the notorious, bloodthirsty Salador San. An old friend. All he ever wanted was someone to buy his cargo quickly before the tide left, and sell it without telling where I got it. In time, I saved enough to buy a small plot of land and found a woman who was kind enough to overlook my trade. She gave me a son, Mathos. And we dreamt of the traders' circle around the Jade Sea, just one trip, and I could settle us and our family for life. Then some Storm Lord revolted against the Iron Throne. Wars are not as good for smugglers as you'd think. Every harbour fills with guards and inspectors, and the seas filled with blockades and pirates paid by each side to prey on the other. Though I had no love for the Mad King, I'd grown up around the power of King's Landing. I figured this Robert Baratheon would end the same as the other rebel lords, burnt to ash. But he didn't. The North, the Riverlands and the Vale joined him. And then the taverns people drank to Robert's health openly. Brave fools, I thought. But I had a family who'd be left in the cold if I lost my head. When Mace Tyrell marched on Robert's home of Storm's End, I spied the end of the rebellion. The castle was garrisoned by Robert's younger brother Stannis and a small guard, and would not hold out for long. When it fell, Robert would be homeless, and his support would bleed away. This I knew from experience. Months later, Stannis was still holding the castle. Nobody cared, but on voyages, I had seen what famine does, and I thought of all those men in Storm's End who would die unmourned and forgotten. No better than Flea Bottom orphans. I told my wife and myself that I'd get a high price for the onions and salt beef. In truth, I knew I'd be captured by the Tyrell galleys or drowned, but I was too stubborn. Later that night, in the dark, in a tiny boat with a black sail, I cursed myself and the moonlight as I waited for the tide to turn. When it did, the wind beat the sail so hard I ripped it down, fearing the Tyrell ships would hear. Luckily, they'd grown lax. With muffled oars alone, I steered my cargo through the treacherous currents and snarls of rock that give Shipbreaker Bay its name. The waves finally carried me, soaked and near blind from sea water, through the mouth of the cavern beneath the castle. Then, Stannis Baratheon arrived. The siege had left him gaunt, but not weak, never weak. He greeted me and accepted my onions with cool courtesy, betraying no emotion, even as all wept. He doled out the food to his wife and each of his men before he ate himself, a portion no larger than any other. When he finally thanked me, I could see his mind had already returned to the castle's defense. His duty. After Aerys fell and Lord Stark lifted the siege, Stannis summoned me. For my salvation at Storm's End, I was to be granted a knighthood, a keep of my own, and my son taken into Stannis' personal service. Davos of Flea Bottom had become Sir Davos of House Seaworth, and his son would serve the king's own brother. But for my previous crimes as a smuggler, I was to have the fingertips of one hand taken off above the highest joint. Stannis held that I had flouted the laws of the land for years, and a good act does not wash out the bad. In one fell swoop, or 5, Stannis gave my son a future and my family a name that I could never have imagined, nor earned on my own. I still keep the finger bones in a bag around my neck, to remind me what I was and what I owe to Stannis. For during my many years as a smuggler, I visited many ports, taverns and back alleys, and saw many things in this world, but never justice. Until Stannis.
Cute. Let's see. So we had Davos grow up in Flea Bottom, which he had mentioned. Somebody had mentioned Flea Bottom. I think it was Davos. Which I'm assuming it sounds like a bad area in King's Landing? Question mark. And then he was born like in the House Seaworth, like that's his family. And then he became a smuggler to get out of the slums, sounds like. And he was a very good smuggler. He was very good at it. And he started partnering with Salador, who we've met already. And they would basically, Salador would like steal stuff and then Davos would go and sell it. So that's really fun. And then he got a wife and had a son. And then war started, and we learned that wars aren't good for smugglers, which is interesting. And pirates are actually hired to prey on each side, which is crazy to me. So it sounds like during wartime, being a pirate is the best gig. And then he seems to love his family, which I'm wondering what happened to his wife, because we know him and his son are gone now. And I don't think we've ever met his wife. I don't know if she's dead. I don't know. And then he didn't think Robert would win or keep his home, which is very interesting. So he kind of was just like, another rebellion. He's not going to win. But then he just kept thinking of Stannis and all the men like trapped in Storm's End, basically. And was like, wow, I can't imagine if that was like me or my family. Davos is such a gem. He's such a gem. He just like kept picturing them starving and was like, I should bring them food. Like, what a cutie. And so he got a bunch of food and snuck right past the Tyrells, which is insane. And he also made it through Shipbreaker Bay. That's crazy. So that's really fun. So I'm assuming it's like a very like rocky bay that breaks a bunch of ships. And then the siege left Stannis gaunt but not weak. Very interesting word choice there. And then Stannis also gave food to everybody but himself first. So Stannis is like, I really like Stannis's character, but then there's just some things that I'm just like, you're a little weird. But then I really like his character. Like, he's a very honorable man, Like, he does everything by the books. He does things the way they should be done. Unfortunately, he's just in a very corrupt world and it doesn't fit. So that's very interesting to me. Like, everything I learn about Stannis, he sounds like a good guy. Like, he's just very just, very fair, very to the point. And then he gave Davos a knighthood, which is a big deal. And then also a keep of his own, so like his own house. And then his son is also like in Stannis's house now. So like working with him. So it makes sense why Davos worshipped Stannis so much. Like, he really did a lot for his life, like completely turned his life around. And so from somebody who came from, a slum, it sounds like, and was a smuggler all the way up to a knighthood with a keep and a spot for his son, like, that's such a big deal. So I understand now why Davos is like, so Stannis is my king, Stannis is my god type of thing. And then he got his fingers removed for being a smuggler. And then Davos had said he had never seen justice or learned justice until Stannis. So that explains so much in their little relationship. It's so cute. I love it. I love it.
Some great houses call us upstarts. But the truth is that while the Starks and Lannisters fell to the Targaryens in defeat, House Tyrell rose. For thousands of years, our family served as loyal stewards to the kings of the Reach, until the last of their line unwisely burned to death resisting the Targaryen invaders. To save the Reach from a similar fate, we yielded the castle of Highgarden to Aegon and his sisters. In gratitude, the Targaryens gave House Tyrell dominion over the Reach. And we became lords of the castle in which, for generations, we had served. Under the Targaryen dynasty, Westeros prospered. Gone were the petty wars of 7 kingdoms and the endless thirst for minor glories that drove them. The Westerlands enriched the realm. The North guarded it. And the Reach and Riverlands fed it. This harmony is what Robert Baratheon shattered with his rebellion against Aerys Targaryen. When the call to arms came, though, we did not want to answer. The Reach is a gentle land, and honestly, the Mad King was not much loved. But we owed peace and status to his family. My father, Mace Tyrell, called his banners and marched north to battle the rogue Stormlord Robert, who had already defeated 3 forces in a single day. And, at Ashford, my father won. Some chastened my father for not pursuing Robert after the battle. We had cut him off from the Stormlands, the seat of his power, and he had fled north, within easy grasp of Lord Tywin Lannister, the Hand of Aerys, for 20 years. My father moved instead to lay siege to Robert's ancestral stronghold of Storm's End. The rose would strangle the stag as the lion pounced. So we waited. But the lion slumbered, and Robert slipped past the king's forces to join Ned Stark. We could have lifted the siege and deployed our armies north to aid the crown. We could have stormed the walls of the castle and made Robert homeless. But we had ample supplies, control of land and sea, and most of all, patience. Our siege would succeed, eventually, at little cost of life to us. If Robert prolonged the war with minor victories, our capture of Storm's End would hasten his downfall. And if Robert won the war, well, it would not do for him to find us in his halls with the bodies of his brother Stannis and his sworn men. When the lion finally showed his colors and purged King's Landing, we knew our cause was lost. My father chose the peaceful route and bent the knee to Robert, who heartily pardoned us. Strange, considering how we'd beaten him and starved his brother to the brink of death. We were to keep our lands, castle and title, but we knew that we would never be welcome at court. It didn't matter. The Reach was still the most fertile of the 7 kingdoms, and under our hand. Every flower, even the rose, needs pruning. Then it grows strong.
I like learning about the Tyrells. We haven't really learned much about them, so that's really fun. But, y'all, I don't know if this is like, I think this is just Robert not being a good king. This is the second time in this history and lore that I'm like, why are we just pardoning people? Like, I think Balon should have lost his head. I'm with Stannis on that one. And then even Marjorie was like, we got pardoned. I don't know why. So that's really interesting to me. So it seems like Robert, I don't know, I don't want to read this wrong, but it seems like he just wasn't a good king. Like, he didn't know when to chop somebody's head off or not, type of thing. Or maybe he just didn't care. Like, he was like, you know, I have the Iron Throne, who cares, type of thing. Got really cocky and arrogant, thought like, no matter what, nobody's gonna be able to take it from me, type of thing. I don't know. I'm trying to understand Robert's mindset on why he pardoned Balon and why he pardoned the Tyrells. Because he easily could have chopped the Tyrell head off and then gave the land to other people. So that's interesting. That's very interesting. So Marjorie had said that the House Tyrell is seen as upstarts. Is that because of they had like gotten their home from Aegon? So they're like a newer type of home. So they're upstarts. And then the Reach and the Riverlands fed the realm under the Targaryen rule. So they actually really liked the Targaryen rule. The Tyrells were happy that they kind of got promoted under Aegon and their life was peaceful and they were like feeding the realm and everything was good. And then Robert came in and kind of smashed that peace. And so they sided with the Targaryens based off of, she said, we owed the Targaryens peace and status, and that's why they sided with the Targaryens, even though the Mad King was a Mad King. And then the Ashford, the Tyrells had won, which we had learned about last time. And Robert had fled north, and they actually went like right past Tywin, and Tywin could have crushed the rebellion. But we know that Tywin was kind of like waiting it out to pick a side. So that's really interesting because the Tyrells were like, oh, it's fine, you know, like Tywin will go get him. And then Tywin did nothing. So that's really interesting. And then she said the rose strangles while the lion pounces. And I thought that was a really cool saying. Also, there are sigils of rose, and I have a little rose tattooed on me. So I'm basically a Tyrell at this point. And then the Tyrells went to Storm's End. They had that siege that starved Stannis, and they decided to just wait it out. And a big part of it was they didn't want to lose a bunch of their men. They knew like they had the upper hand in this. So they were like, let's just wait it out. One reason is so that way they didn't lose a bunch of their men. And then another reason was, well, just in case Robert wins, it wouldn't look good for us if we killed Stannis. So that's also interesting because we see Tywin kind of making a call like that. And then we see the Tyrells making a call like that, where they're like unsure. And so they're making the most wise choice, not like a duty choice. So that's very interesting. So they kind of waited to pick a side too. And then once again, so odd. I agree with Marjorie. Odd that they got pardoned. And then they kind of knew that they weren't really welcome at court when Robert was king because of everything that happened. They were like, let's not test the boundaries. And so they decided to just stay at home. They have the most fertile lands of the Seven Kingdoms. So we know that they're rich. They have a good army. And they also have good crops, ? So it sounds like the Reach is actually a pretty cool place. I want to go see it. And then even the rose needs pruning in order to grow. So that was an interesting comment. What do you mean by that, girl? Sounds like the Tyrells might be a little more crafty than we give them credit for. And mostly because they kind of made the same call-ish as Tywin, where they were like, let's wait. Let's see what happens. Because I feel like most armies or families, if they were in the spot at Storm's End, the siege spot, they would have just went in and taken it. But the Tyrells were like, wait, let's see what happens first. So I think they're a little more calculated than they let on, which is very interesting to me. I actually really like the Tyrells. I want to learn more about them. Let's do it.
House Tyrell trace our descent to Garth Greenhand, the legendary first king of the Reach who made the land bloom. But so too does every noble house around us. It seems dear ancestor Garth planted as many flowers as he plucked. A king should have more consideration for his line, don't you think? For over 1,000 years, the Greenhand sons and grandsons ruled the Reach as House Gardener. The offshoots of his daughters grew into vast and powerful houses in their own right, except for House Tyrell. We chose instead to serve our Gardener cousins faithfully as stewards, to manage their stronghold of Highgarden and the daily affairs of the Reach. Our words are growing strong. And under our stewardship, the Reach did just that. As did we. Until a blundering king almost cost us everything. Aegon Targaryen had landed in Westeros. King Mern allied us with the Rock to repel the upstarts' army. One can only marvel that King Mern did not reconsider when he saw the living dragons against him. Perhaps he should have sought counsel from his trusted stewards before he set out. Then again, perhaps he did. At the Field of Fire, Aegon, and let us not forget, his sisters, burnt the combined armies of the Reach and Rock. King Mern paid for his misjudgment with his life and that of his ancient family. In a day, the Reach had lost its king, its ruling house, and most of its army. Thankfully for everyone, my ancestor, Harlan Tyrell, had better sense. Until the Maesters sorted out the entail among Mern's cousins, Harlan the Steward was acting Lord of Highgarden. To ensure peace and life in the Reach, he would yield the castle to Aegon. The other castles and families would then follow, as they had since the Dawn Age. Aegon had a continent to conquer, and the fertile Reach was too valuable to raze. He accepted Harlan's proposal and welcomed our lands into his kingdom. To show his gratitude, Aegon entitled Harlan to Highgarden, the castle his family had served for 1,000 years, and made House Tyrell his wardens of the South, choosing us over older, greater families in the Reach. Our house thus owed everything to the Targaryens. So is it any wonder we stayed true to King Aerys, even during his madness, and even after Robert Baratheon rebelled? Some may question my father for laying siege to the Baratheons' home, instead of marching to aid Prince Rhaegar before Robert could kill him and scatter the royal army. But let us not forget that we had already dealt Robert his only defeat of the war at Ashford. If Lord Tywin Lannister had not vanquished the Mad King so suddenly, our siege would have destroyed Robert's home and his brothers, and won the war for Aerys. But when the Targaryens fell, House Tyrell again chose peace and prosperity over war and devastation, and bent the knee to King Robert Baratheon, first of his name. We returned to Highgarden to manage the affairs of the Reach, as we had for thousands of years, and will for 1,000 more. Other great houses take lions and wolves for their sigils, and draw their power from the gold in their mountains or the cold of their winters. But mountains run dry, winter yields to spring, and the rose blooms once more.
Interesting. Y'all, I'm like trying so hard to read the Tyrells because a part of me is like, okay, they could be extremely crafty, or they're just very like chill, we just want to vibe. They're a peaceful house. But I don't know, the way Marjorie talks makes me feel like she has a secret, you know? She had kind of told us like more lore on like Garth Greenhand and how they were stewards to him, and he had planted more flowers than he plucked, so he had like all his daughters and like formed all these houses. And then there was the Tyrell house, who were just like their cousins, she said, and they were just stewards to him. And then their words are growing strong, and then the Field of Fire happened, and she makes a comment that I'm like, what are you saying? She made a comment of, you know, it's so odd that he didn't bow. He should have talked to his stewards. Perhaps he did. And so that comment tells me that, like, they maybe, like, manipulated him into, like, oh, keep the battle going, we'll win. And they knew damn well he was gonna die. And then they swooped in. I may be reading way too much into this. And then they swooped in, went and talked to Aegon, and they were like, please, sir. And then Aegon was like, yeah, you can have it, without realizing that there was actually like older, more powerful houses besides the Tyrells, but the Tyrells got there first. That's what I'm getting from it. Like, I'm getting they like snaked their way to the top type of thing. Or it could have just been crazy coincidence. Garth Greenhand, or whoever the king was at the time, just died in the Field of Fire, and then the Tyrells wound up getting it, and that's that. But I feel like there's some craftiness there, because she had made that comment of like, oh, we should have talked to his stewards, and they're the stewards. And then she said, perhaps he did. Tyrells? Are Tyrells like mini Lannisters? I'm watching the Tyrells. I'm watching them. But then they keep saying, you know, peace and prosperity. And then she said, mountains run dry, winter turns into spring, but the rose blooms once more. So that's interesting. That's interesting. I'm really liking the Tyrells. They're like a little puzzle for me.
Nobody knows why the Targaryens first came to the island of Dragonstone. Old Valyria was then at the height of its power and the center of the civilized world, which ended at the Narrow Sea. Westeros was a filthy backwater with 7 kings squabbling over borders and minor glories. So much for progress. The island itself was and is nothing. It had no gold or gems to lure Valyrian nobility. All it has is rock, mostly a shiny black stone too brittle for war and too sharp for building. The Targaryens called it dragon glass. I call it useless. But the Targaryens managed to raise a castle here. Simpletons claim they used ancient Valyrian sorcery, forgetting that the Targaryens brought a small army with them from Essos. There's no magic in strong backs, though admittedly the castle is unlike any in Westeros. Foreign and strange. If the Targaryens ever regretted their barren outpost and longed for the comforts of home, the doom made their folly permanent. Valyria collapsed into the waves and was no more. To look east was to see the ruin of their homeland, the greatest civilization before or since. But to look west, as Aegon realized, was to see a fertile land ripe for conquest. Perhaps even a new Valyria. Though good for little else, Dragonstone was the perfect staging point for Aegon's invasion of Westeros. The Blackwater Bay granted easy access to the continent. The lands there were disputed by 3 kingdoms, the Reach, the Iron Islands, and the Stormlands. But their capitals were far enough away that none could mount a force before Aegon got a foothold, even if their kings had been able to stop bickering over whose problem he was. Then it was too late. Aegon had chosen his first camp well, with the bay to the east, the river to the south, and open fields to the north and west. His army would be impossible to take by surprise. A perfect site for an invasion, and one day, his capital city, King's Landing. The Doom had taught the Targaryens the prudence of refuge. After the conquest, Dragonstone became the seat of the crowned prince and heir to the Iron Throne. It would serve them well, and me ill, 300 years later, after my brother Robert Baratheon rebelled against the Iron Throne and the Lannisters slaughtered the Mad King Aerys and his royal family. Robert dispatched me to deal with the last surviving Targaryen children. But before I arrived, a loyal knight smuggled them across the Narrow Sea to safety. Hatred for the Targaryens blinded Robert. Unjustly, I was blamed and stripped of our family's castle of Storm's End and given Dragonstone in its stead. Over the years, whenever I demanded my rights restored, Robert would remind me of the island's royal pedigree and pretend he was doing me honor, as if I were one of his tavern girls to be so easily deceived and dismissed. But Robert is dead, and I, Stannis Baratheon, am the rightful king of Westeros. Let the usurpers and traitors sit on the Iron Throne. From Dragonstone, I will be the dagger at their throat.
That dragon in the background was cool. So we already knew the Targaryens were at Dragonstone. We don't know why they were at Dragonstone. Like, maybe they just wanted a little family home, a little family vacay spot. So they were at Dragonstone when the Doom happened. And then Stannis called Westeros a filthy backwater kingdom at the time. And so that was when, like, we had all these different kings and they kind of like all were like in their own little corners. And then Dragonstone, all it has is rock, which is the obsidian dragon glass that Sam had found. So there's a connection with dragon glass, and I'm trying to figure it out. But I guess Dragonstone has a bunch of this dragon glass, and then we also found dragon glass in the north with Sam, and apparently it was from the First Men? Question mark. So that's interesting. So how did the First Men get dragon glass when it seems like the dragon glass originates from Dragonstone? Interesting. We also had the Targaryens had a small army from Essos. I don't think we've learned anything about Essos. And then they built a castle, and it's a very like foreign castle. It's different to other castles, which is cool, and I want to see it. We've seen like parts of it, like we saw, I think like that battle room, and that was really cool. But I want to see like the whole thing. They could also see the Doom from the east. Like, could they like see it? Like they were just like sitting in Dragonstone, they could see the Doom. That'd be crazy. And then they looked west, and they were like, New Valyria, and then they took over. And it sounds like Aegon was very good in like warfare and strategy. Like he entered in King's Landing, which just so happened to be like the perfect spot, and the other kingdoms couldn't unify in time to stop Aegon. So by the time they were like trying to figure out what to do, Aegon was already on the move. So that's the problem with having all these kingdoms separated. And then we had Dragonstone from then became the heir seat. So if you're next in line, you go to Dragonstone. And Stannis was stripped of Storm's End and given Dragonstone. And then Robert was like, it's a good thing, you're my heir. And Stannis still took it as like a punishment, and was resentful over it. He wanted Storm's End, not Dragonstone. So that kind of answers my question from earlier. And then he keeps saying, or people keep saying, a loyal knight smuggled the Targaryen children out. And I feel like that loyal knight means something. Like, who was it? Maybe not. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I'm dying to know who smuggled the Targaryen children out. Anyways, on to the next. By Sandor. I think Sandor's the
Honor,
Hound.
glory, lies to make idiot boys want knighthood, and idiot girls spread their legs for it. Let me tell you what makes a knight. Killing. Either enough men or the right man. House Clegane should know. We're very good at both. Most families claim some great ancestor so far back that nobody can prove them liars. Not us. My grandfather kept the kennel for Lord Titus Lannister of Casterly Rock, the father of Lord Tywin. Lord Titus was a weak man who didn't know it. One day while hunting, he stumbled on a lioness. Instead of embracing the man who wore her on his banners, she tried to tear out his throat. Lucky my grandfather came up with the dogs and drove the big cat away. As a reward, the Cleganes got lands and a keep and a son to squire for the Lannisters. We took the 3 hounds who died for them as our new sigil. When Tywin Lannister became Lord of Casterly Rock, he wanted more from his former kennel master than fealty. He bet that training hounds to kill isn't far from training boys to kill. In just 2 generations, my brother Gregor and I proved him right. I gutted my first man at 12. Years after, servants started disappearing in our keep, and even a sister I don't remember. But nobody could prove anything against Gregor, or dared if they caught him at it. For my father wanted a knight in our family, and thought he'd found one in Gregor, who at 13 towered over enough men that they called him the Mountain. Sure, Gregor looks quite the champion from a distance, but a mountain can't cleave a man in half with one blow, and won't break a wench's face if she talks. Through Lord Tywin's influence, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen kindly anointed my brother personally. A great honor for our family, everyone said. 1 year later, Sir Gregor chivalrously sacked the prince's city, brained the prince's baby, and raped and murdered the prince's wife, winning our family yet more honor from the new king and queen. Soon after, my father died. They say in a hunting accident. The same day that Gregor became lord of the Clegane lands, gold and anything under his roof, I left our home to take service at Casterly Rock. Lord Tywin is not like his father.
Neither is King Joffrey. Oh, the likes of me would never be on the King's Guard, with all those true knights. Between them, a man who serves the Lannisters will never lack for killing. I'll guard this king, such as he is. Gregor will kill the other ones, such as he does. When we're done, we'll see how many people still believe in songs and fairy tales.
Interesting. So the Hound serves the king, and then the Mountain does all the most of the dirty work on the outside too. So that's really interesting. So, honor and glory, not really their thing. They just want to kill. And it sounds like their father worked in the kennels, hence the whole dog name, ? And then their father saved Tytos from getting attacked by a lioness, which is insane because that's their sigil. So you could just tell Tytos is like not up to par in the Lannister family. Like we're not proud of Tytos in the Lannister family. And then what else? There was a lot. So basically, was it Tytos or Tywin or somebody was like, hey, we train hounds to kill. Why don't you raise your boys to kill? So they're like super knights. Like they've been training since the minute they were born type of thing. And then they had a sister that randomly died, aka Gregor killed her, ? And it sounds like he might have killed his father too, because the Hound had said, my dad, they say he died in a hunting accident. So I think Gregor might have killed him as well. So it sounds like they were both raised to be like very ruthless, very like knights in training their whole lives. They just kill. But Gregor has a few screws loose, maybe. He might need a therapist. And he's very hateful and angry and brutal and violent. And then they call him the Mountain because he's so huge. And then Rhaegar, I think I'm reading this right. Rhaegar knighted the Mountain, like made him into a proper knight. And then, which was like an honor. And then the Mountain is the one that betrayed Rhaegar basically, and like killed Elia and did horrible things to Elia and her children. So that's like a full circle moment. It's just sick. We don't like the Mountain. I like the Hound, but I don't like the Mountain. And then he also said a man who serves the Lannisters will never lack for killing, or something like that. So that's really fascinating because it seems like the Hound and the Mountain were kind of like created by the Lannisters in a way. It's like they just are made to be Lannister fighters. Like they just kill, and they like doing it. Very interesting. So for the Hound to say F the king and leave is kind of a really big deal because the Lannisters made them into who they are, in a way. I don't know. The Alchemist Guild. Fire, right?
Dragons conquered the Seven Kingdoms. But to rule them, the Targaryens needed a less temperamental tool. When the great King Maegor saw the power of the Alchemist Guild, he blessed us with his patronage. In those days, we commonly transmuted metals and other wonders, but the king was most interested in our mastery of the substance, which those not of our order dub wildfire. A slight misnomer. To the uninitiated, the substance indeed seems uncontrollable. Water will not extinguish it, nor plate of steel repel it. Our order alone knows its secrets. In bare stone cells beneath the guild hall, our acolytes prepare the substance with utmost care and ancient magic. Apprentices then remove the jars to a secure storage. Overseeing its purity are the wisdoms, such as myself, who are adept in the alchemical mysteries. Should an acolyte prove unworthy and allow the substance to ignite, the ceilings are spelled to collapse and fill the room with sand. For once lit, only smothering or starvation will quench the fire. Many years did the Alchemist Guild serve the Targaryens faithfully, until we were beset on all sides by the envious, the Order of Maesters, who dismissed all learning but their own, and the charlatans who hawked green paint and worse in our names. After the unfortunate Prince Aerion Targaryen, drunk with wine, boasted that a draught of the substance would transmute him into a dragon, we lost our royal favor. Then came the wise King Aerys, second of his name. I was merely an acolyte when he restored our guild to its former glory. As had his great forefathers, he appreciated our secret arts, even naming Wisdom Rossart as Hand of the King. Together, they punished his enemies as befits a true Targaryen. During the War of the Usurper, I heard whispers that King Aerys had engaged our greatest wisdoms for an ultimate weapon against his foe. But sadly, King's Landing must have fallen before it could be used, and many of our wisdoms disappeared in the sack of the city, victims of ignorance and envy, as ever, I'd wager. Yet our order perseveres, like the substance which grows ever more potent as it ages. We perfect our ancient arts in darkness, forgotten by the world. We are masters of the fire, but we live only to serve. All we need is the right spark.
Interesting. Y'all are sus. Y'all are sus. So it's uncontrollable. No steel repels it or water stops it. They make it with ancient magic, which is very interesting. Also, they have it set up that the ceiling collapses if the fire, like if somebody were to mess up and set it on fire, because the only way to stop it is to smother it. Very interesting. So maesters and kind of everybody else, they kind of dismiss the alchemist guild and they're like, we don't rock with them. They're weird. They just make fire. And so they're like kind of very insulted by that. And then they called the Mad King the Wise King Aerys because he was so kind of like obsessed with wildfire. And so they kind of formed a little bond with like the Alchemist Guild and the Mad King. They became besties. But in the past, a Targaryen tried to drink a sip of it to become a dragon. Oh, brother. And then he said that the Mad King wanted to use wildfire against his foes, but he didn't do it in time before Lannister or Tywin came in. So that's interesting. And also, I could totally see that happening. And then it grows more potent as it ages. So all of those tubes of wildfire in there, if we didn't use them all in the Stannis battle, they're going to get more and more powerful as they age. It's kind of like fermenting as it goes. That's crazy. Very interesting.
A long time ago, they say, some old southern king enslaved our giants by magic and forced them to build your famous wall. Then he kicked all of my kind to the other side and raised an army to keep us there. And we're the uncivilized ones. Damn. Wildlings. Might be Sir King was wise. Even a giant can be made to kneel, but only if he wants a better crack at your head. The free folk don't follow a man because his father tells us. If the king's son was brave and strong, aye, we'd follow him as we did his father. If he wasn't... But it seems to me, as much as the wall keeps us out, it keeps you southerners in. You follow laws you didn't make. Kneel to kings you didn't choose, and pray to gods you never hear from. Our traders talk about your seven. Beyond the wall, the stars shine bright and clear. Any gods there aren't listening to the likes of men. Our gods are of the forest, in the trees that shelter us and the rivers that feed us. They gave the land for all of us to share. We fish, farm, and hunt where we will when we need. If a man wants a woman, he has to prove he'll give her strong and cunning sons. Now, it's easy. When she tries to slit his throat, he don't let her. With the free folk, you get what you can take, and you keep what you can hold. No more. I wonder, even if my kind didn't hop over your wall, would he still set your Night's Watch to guard it? You Southerners are rich. You always have more steel, gold, and daughters. I think you're afraid. If you've always knelt, you don't know what freedom is. And if you've not been beyond the wall, you don't know what fear is. You will.
That was spooky. She said, if you've always knelt, you don't know what freedom is. That's a crazy line. And then she said, if you've never been beyond the wall, you don't know what fear is. Wow. I actually really like that. That's fun. She said, if she tries to slit your throat, don't let her. My type of people, y'all. Kidding. Jokes. Anyways, so there's a rumor, which I take a little bit of everything. I take it all with a grain of salt, but with a grain of truth as well. Where she said the Southern Kings, who we're assuming is like Brandon the Builder maybe, because she calls everybody Southerners, enslaved the giants with magic to build the wall, and then pushed them on the other side of the wall and was like, bye. What are the odds that's true? Because if so, that's foul. That's foul if we did that. And then she said even a giant can be made to kneel if he's hit upside the head or something like that. So very interesting. And then the free folk follow who's worthy. And I'm actually finding like a weird connection between the free folk and the Iron Men, because she had said you get what you can take and you keep what you can hold. And that's very similar to the Iron Price in a way. So that's very interesting to me. Like, they're very similar. And then they also worship the gods of the forest. So I'm assuming that's the same gods as the First Men, as the Northerners. So they worship the same gods, ? But they believe that beyond the wall, the land is free and open. You just have to, live your life and take what you want and keep it. So that's interesting. And she also made a comment about Southerners are rich with more steel, gold, and daughters and not men. Or sons. And so I think that's funny. So she kind of sees anybody on the other side of the wall as kind of like, you're not free. You're kind of like chained to all these rules. And then at the same time, like, you're weaker and you're scared. And this is our land to begin with. So try me. I like that. I like her. She's so fun. The Night's Watch.
Swords in the darkness. Aye. The Black Brothers of the Night's Watch are that, at least. As too many of the free folk know. You Southerners are strange. A man murders, and you train him to kill better. A man thieves or rapes, and you send him where it's dark and private. Or at least you make him promise to be good. Or then you make him regret even that. From the time he's woken to the time he's allowed to sleep, he walks the frozen wall, carries frozen stones, or boils frozen food. When he lies down at night, he can't have nobody to warm his frozen bed. Well, not unless the crows like to nest together. Do you think he remembers the stories they told him then? About when the White Walkers woke in the land of always winter, and how the wall and the Night's Watch were raised to stop them the next time. Never mind trapping us on the other side. We free folk have our stories too. About how one of your king crows found something cold in the woods, with bright blue eyes. How he brought her home through your wall and declared himself Night's King. 13 years, he and his queen ruled over his brothers, making sacrifices as black as their cloaks. Lucky for you Southerners, the Free Folk rallied to a king beyond the wall, as we will when need be, and marched on the ancient castle he'd taken for his own, the Night Fort. With the help of the Starks, we killed the demon and cleansed your precious watch. And then they thanked us, and kicked us back across the wall. As you always have. Gendel, Raymond Redbeard, the Horned Lord, each chosen as a king beyond the wall, each promising victory. And all falling to the Night's Watch and the Starks. But this time is different. Our new king knows your tricks. You called him a Brother Crow once, but you never forgot his wings. We know how you think. We know where you're weak. Watch for us from your wall if you like. With the cold, you won't even feel the blade slip into your back.
Ooh. Guys, I think I kind of side with the wildlings on this one. Why are we being so mean to them? Anyways, so she's kind of saying, like, at the wall, like, none of the stuff you're doing makes sense. Like, you send a murderer to the wall because he murdered people, and then you teach him how to murder better. And then you have somebody who does, like, horrible things, Reeves and R-word, and then you send him into the dark where he can keep doing bad stuff, and nobody's gonna really, like, pay attention to it. So it's a very interesting perspective, and she's right. You know, it's like, why would we just send them off to do their own devices or teach them how to kill better? Like, that makes no sense. But it also makes sense for the Southerners because, like, what else are we going to do with them? So very interesting. She said you just make him promise to do better. And it's like, she's like that would work. So that's very interesting. And then the Night's King. I might be reading way too much into this, but is that the main guy? Is he still alive? Or did we kill both of them? Or did we kill only the female one? And I didn't realize there were female ones. Is she the only female? I have so many questions. Is she the only female one? Did she start all of this? Like, who is she? Where'd she come from? Like, what? And so sounds like we had a guy on the Night's Watch. He was maybe a ranger, went out and found, I hope I'm reading this right. Really hope I'm reading this right. He found a female White Walker. And was like, ooh, she's pretty. And maybe she, like, seduced him or something. He brought her back to the wall. Then she turned all of them into White Walkers. And then that became a problem. And so Ned Stark and the wildlings teamed up and got rid of the problem. Killed all of them. And then I think they killed all of them. Because it wouldn't make sense to, like, kill the girl and then send the guy back out. Because I was thinking the main guy that looked at Sam in the last episode was the guy who got seduced by the girl, but I don't think that would make any sense. Anyways, you know what I'm saying. And then after they got rid of all of them, got rid of that problem, you know, White Walkers invading the wall, infiltrating, they were like, all right, thanks for your help, wildlings, bye. And then just, like, kicked them back out again. That's insane. That's crazy. Also, did she say the Starks or did she say Ned Stark? I think she said the Starks. And then that's so crazy. And then they have had multiple kings in the north before. So this isn't the first king in the north, but they've all died to the Night's Watch. So they've kind of gone out of their way to kill them. And then now their next king, what did she call it? King Beyond the Wall is a man of the Night's Watch. She calls them crows, a crow. So that's really interesting. So it basically sounds like they just want to get on the other side of the wall and they're not allowed to. And they are a little more barbaric and a little more brutal than most people. But at the end of the day, if we're trapping them out there with White Walkers, let them in. Like, what else are they supposed to do? You're going to kill a bunch of people. I guess it's not their problem because they're safe on the other side of the wall, but That's crazy. So they're trying really hard to get, it sounds like, I could be reading this wrong, but it sounds like they're trying really hard to get on the other side of the wall so that way they can be safe from the White Walkers. And so now they have a crow, which is very interesting, and I want to learn the story of that, of why did he leave the Night's Watch? Why is he king in the north now? What's gonna happen? So basically they're like plotting to take over the wall, and they're coming, and they're plotting, and they're planning. Very interesting. I think literally the only motivation I can come up with for that is that they want to get away from the White Walkers. They want to get to a safer spot, or maybe they just want a more comfortable home. I don't know. I'm assuming we're going to learn more about it as we learn more about the wildlings. But wow, that was juicy, y'all. So good. So good. So we got to learn so much. We learned more about the Tyrells. We learned about Davos. We learned kind of the story from Kat's perspective. We got to learn about the Tullys a little more. Stannis a lot more, which I was really happy about because we don't have a ton on Stannis. We got to learn about the free cities. Loved that because Jorah's always talking about them. Got to learn a little bit more about Karth. We got to learn a lot about the Greyjoys, which I loved. And what else? We learned a little bit more about the wildfire. Y'all know what we learned. So juicy, very juicy. Like I was saying before, this will be my last history and lores, just because I do want to read these lovely books up here, and I don't want to know everything before going into the books. I definitely want to save some stuff for the books. So I'm really excited for that, but this will be my last history and lore for the show. And then when I am reading the books, I do plan on making little vloggy vlogs, kind of just like telling you my thoughts or things that I caught, the fun things while reading. I've never made one before, but I think it'd be fun. And then, yeah, we'll start season 3. I learned so much. Really good, y'all. Let me know what I missed. Let me know any fun things you learned as well. You know the deal. And that's it. All right, y'all. See you in the next one. Have a good day. Bye.